Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted great change or more success in your life, then do we have the Willpower Doesn't Work show for you. Today I'll be talking with Benjamin Hardy, PhD, since 2015 the #1 writer on Medium.com and soon to be the New York Times best-selling author of a must-read book that has absolutely blown me away, Willpower Doesn't Work. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about the hidden keys to success and how to change your environment to change your life. That, plus we'll talk about Nate and Teslas, Simba and the Lion King, publishing papers and Dr. Nate Lambert, four-wheelers and paint gun fights, badges on backpacks, Aunt Jane and the Genius Network, Joel Weldon and 400 books, Central and Peru, the power of foster kids, and what on earth uncooked Costco tortillas has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Ben. Gotcha. Are you ready to shine?
Yes, I am, my man.
Woohoo! So before we dive right in things, and I'm going to want to go way on back to before you were 11 years of age, but before I do that, where in the world did you come from? You're just too good to be just starting out.
I don't know. I've been writing online for a few years, but this has been a long time coming. I've known that I was going to be a writer and writing in this space since 2010. But as you know from the book, it wasn't until I became a foster parent that I finally had what we would call the traction to make it happen. And we can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I've wanted to do this for a long time. I've been studying it for years. And I finally had the situation compel me to move forward.
And what's fascinating about you, and I really want to go into your childhood here in a second, but what's fascinating is, and I'm a tinkerer and you're a tinkerer, but both you and I, we want to reach for the top rung, learn from the best, and model that first. And that's very clear because this book is refined. This book stands up there against any other book. And like I was telling you, I've had over 800 shows. I've had interview after interview, and it stands up there because you have done your homework, which means that you've studied and learned and done mentorship and tried to understand what it took. You didn't just jump in and say, we're going to start getting our feet wet. You went to the top and learned from there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I believe in that principle that, we talk about investing and learning from Joshua Waitzkin and, who you surround yourself, who you become like. And so what I decided to do is study literally the people where I wanted to be. Rather, one of the things that Tim Ferriss says is that it's most competitive, where everyone else is. There's room at the top, in other words. And so I think you can just figure out how to start there.
I like that. It's what Jessica and I, my wife Jessica, she's the producer, and myself, we talk about, which is skipping the ladder. And we've done that several times, reinvented ourselves in our lives and said, why work our way up the ladder? Let's just skip the whole thing, learn, and jump straight to the top.
Yeah.
It's more exciting that way.
You did that. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing how you did that.
So, well, we've done that in a few industries. We did that. We ended up becoming the bestsellers of barefoot running and barefoot walking and helped push that whole movement forward. We started here, and within the first couple months, we're one of the top news shows on iTunes. And then we took off absolutely from there. It's a combination of a work ethic. I'm not going to call that willpower, but of building an environment, meaning structuring your time, structuring your home environment, structuring your life. Because I was an Olympic trained athlete, never made it to the Olympics, but trained at the Olympic Training Center and learned how to build or engineer my environment for my success, and then look at what it took, look at what are the best doing. But actually learn and study from them, but don't study from them too much. Because I want to be able to step back. This is the Dr. Srini Pillai of Harvard, tinker, dabble, doodle, try. I want to learn, and then I want to step back. I want to dive in, and I want to dive out so that I can go quiet, my intuitive side can kick in, and then I can make whatever I do mine.
Love it. Yeah, and obviously you guys make a decision that that's the level you want to play at. You know what I mean?
We can't see any other way to play because you're either going to be struggling to get your way up to the top of the food chain, not as a, I believe the journey is the goal. You don't have to reach any place. Enjoy the moment just where you're at. But with that said, it's more fun to play a big game, and it's more fun to set that bar obscenely high, crazy levels of high. And you know the expression, is it Da Vinci who said it, shoot for the stars, you hit the moon.
Yep, totally.
So let's go back in your career. Let's go back way on when, early childhood. Life is not going so well for you, is it?
Nope.
And so you had parents divorce when you're 11, you're in junior high and high school, the world is spinning around you. And then I lost 8th grade. You lost, it was the year after high school. I lost 8th grade to Ultima 2. And then you lost World of Warcraft, I understand, just after high school.
Yeah, so I mean, really, what happened is when my parents got divorced, the divorce, and I don't go into this many details in the book, but the divorce sent my father into an intense tailspin. He actually became a meth addict, and my father's house was a really rough place. Luckily, he's come out of that. He's doing really well, but I grew up in a really intense addiction experience, and my mom was trying to run a business, so there was very little structure in my life. I barely graduated high school, and I was playing World of Warcraft, by the way, all through high school. Just trying to escape. I was very much into World of Warcraft, skateboarding, snowboarding, anything to avoid the reality that had become my life. And as you mentioned, I found myself a year after high school, age 19, living at my cousin's house, playing World of Warcraft all day. I didn't have a job. I was, they just would bring pizzas home, and I would just drink Mountain Dew, eat pizza. And I just was asking myself, how the heck did I end up here? And I think that if most people were to look at me in that situation, they would have just said I'm not very ambitious, or that I'm lazy, or that I just don't know where I'm going. And that's what psychologists would call the fundamental attribution error, attributing something to someone as if they're a bad person. And one of the things I go into in the book is that the opposite of addiction is connection. Willpower is a very individual approach. It's trying to do it alone. It's trying to fight silent battles. It's trying to take on the world. The opposite of willpower is connection, or even imagination. But, I was trying to do it by myself, and I just couldn't do it. I mean, I just kept failing. And so a cousin of mine started going running, and he just invited me to come a few times with him. And we started running a little bit. And obviously, there's a lot of amazing stuff connected with exercise, but he stopped running after a short period of time. He only lasted for a few weeks, but I just decided to keep doing it. And I just started running a few miles a night, and I would do it in the middle of the night. Literally, I would run in the middle of the road in the middle of the night, and just started doing that more and more. And the longer I started doing it, the more I was outside of the triggers and all the problems and things around me, the more I gave myself time to just think about my life. And it was during those runs that I decided that I was going to get out of there, that I couldn't actually make the change I wanted unless I literally went and started over and became a new person. I had a lot of friends joining the military, a lot of the friends going to Peace Corps or mission experiences. And so I decided that I would do a church humanitarian style mission. And so I went and did that for a few years. And it was literally like I became a new person on the spot. In that new situation, I could be whoever I wanted to be. I started reading lots of books, having lots of transformational experiences, helping, serving people. I read probably 100 books during those 2 years on psychology, philosophy, religion, spirituality, all sorts of stuff. And I just started filling stacks of journals. I could actually show you some of them. So these are the journals from my mission, literally.
Awesome. I love them. Are those composition books? Because that's what I use.
So these are literally just they're just regular paper and pencil journals. And needless to say, it was during that time. So this was from 2008 to basically January 2008 to January 2010. I decided I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know what I would study in school, but I came home, and what shocked me was that I had become a completely different person. And when I came home, everything felt exactly the same as when I left. All of the people, all of my friends used the same language. They talked to me as if I was still in high school, because that's where our attachment was. Our relationship was based on the past, and that's not who I was nor who I wanted to be. it was stunning, just the energy, and I could feel it. I could feel the difference. And I knew that if I had stayed there, I would quickly revert back to the person I was. So I decided to go to school, different place than my friends, and just pursued different things. I got really into studying, psychology and writing and learning. And so that was kind of experience, big experience number one that taught me about environment. And then obviously becoming a foster parent more recently was big experience number two.
So, and I would put in there meeting your wife, Lauren, as maybe a big experience number 1.5 in there as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the concepts, obviously who you marry, if you choose to get married, that's got to be one of the most fundamental components of your environment. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, heck yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Winston Churchill said we shape our house and then our house shapes us. And so one of the big reasons I wrote this book is because I'll tell you, ever since I wrote this book, I have people call me all the time and say, Ben, how do I do this? Literally, my husband or my wife or whatever, they won't change. What do I do? And a lot of people, because they don't realize the power of environment, they don't make the wisest decisions, because literally who you marry is going to impact every component of your life, but it's also going to literally impact who you become. It shapes you. And so, yeah, I was very thoughtful in the type of person I wanted to marry, and she didn't have to have the same attributes. She didn't have to have the same hobbies, but more, I wanted to create an environment that would allow me to easily be the person I wanted to be. I mean, one of the big things I talk about in the book is that from a psychological perspective, we outsource almost all of our behavior to our environment. Almost everything is subconscious. Just like when you start driving a car, for a while you have to really think about your behavior, but eventually you just do it automatically. And that's how most behavior is. You don't really have to think about it. You're just acting based on the situation. And so I wanted a situation that allowed me to act how I wanted to without having to think about it. If it's conscious, you're probably having to use a little bit of willpower.
Yeah, I remember I used to have a manifestation thing that I would go through each evening before I would go to sleep, basically prayer. And one of the prayers that I had is God, if the right person is supposed to come into my life, let her be someone who makes me more of who I am capable of being and who brings out the best in who I can be.
Totally. Yeah, 100% agree. That's pretty much the same perspective I had.
Woo! So you, like me, like to challenge yourself and you like to help others. And maybe it was your time doing mission work in a sense that had you guys wrap your minds around adopting 3 foster children who were exceptionally disadvantaged. What a huge boon to them, a boon to society and to you, because you just threw yourself in the frying pan.
Totally. Yeah. So what happened was when we moved to South Carolina, so that's where I'm studying my PhD in organizational psychology, we started fostering immediately 3 kids who live in a county right next to Clemson University. And one of the studies I talk about in the book is the equality of opportunities study that happened at Harvard from 2 economists. And basically they studied a person's opportunity to enhance their economic situation based on whatever county they lived in. And the kids that we got live in what's called Oconee County, and literally they're in the 9th percentile for upward mobility. Their chances of increasing their economic situation had they stayed there were basically none. But yeah, my wife actually grew up with foster kids. She grew up with foster kids in her home. I think she had like 40 come through, but never any long term. Mm-hmm. They were called therapeutic foster kids, so they were short term. And we had trouble getting, pregnant, even though we've had all the tests and they've said nothing's gone wrong. Actually, my wife's in the process of doing in vitro for a second attempt. And I think probably she'll have a better chance now that all the pressure of the adoption is now gone. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Actually, we ended up adopting these kids literally about 3 weeks ago. And what's interesting
Wait, pause, because that was one of the big questions I have. A huge, massive congratulations. Woohoo!
Thank you.
That is huge, Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and if you want to talk, one of the things I talk about in the book is that every environment has rules. And in the state of South Carolina, the laws around foster care were so limiting that we had no chance. It took many miracles for us just to stay with these kids. But our attorney is a really compassionate, amazing man, and he really cares about what's going on here. And so he's taken several cases to the Supreme Court, not ours, but what literally had to happen for us to adopt these kids was that the laws in South Carolina around foster care and adoption had to change. Basically, what the law was is that foster parents could not seek adoption. But according to the handbooks and things like that, there was a lot of confusion and ambiguity around that. But our attorney took several court cases up to the Supreme Court, and they realized, no, foster parents should have the ability, especially if there's no, parents, to seek adoption proactively. And so once that happened, as soon as that court case happened, we went to court very shortly after that, and they just granted us adoption. And it just shows you that literally your freedom as a person is based on the rules of your environment. And when the law was changed, we were free to adopt these kids. It wasn't based on our willpower. It wasn't based on our ambition. It was based on the rules of our context. But yeah, we just barely adopted our kids. It's amazing. And, just kind of going back from the beginning, when we got these kids, it was right during my first year of my PhD program. And what you see when you take in 3 kids from a very terrible environment. And now that we've actually adopted them, I can speak a little bit more freely about it. Back when I wrote the book, I had to be a lot more limiting in my language because there's a lot of laws about foster parents and what they can say. But these kids, there were 5 of them actually. There were 2 half siblings who we don't have, but they all slept in one room. Mm-hmm. There was clothes mounted to the roof. They were put to sleep using cough syrup, and just watching TV. So when we got these kids, there was so much anger, so much neglect. Our 5-year-old girl would throw tables and chairs and it just shows you, what we've realized with these kids is that they have amazing, limitless potential, and they've experienced a huge transformation over the last 3 years. We've got them in Montessori school, sports and things like that. But when we first got them, they were the product of a very rough environment, and no amount of willpower could have provided them the opportunities that they've gotten in our home. The experience has shaped us all. It's changed us all. I'd never read a book on parenting. And, when you become a foster parent, you have to educate yourself fast, especially when you're dealing with this level of trauma, this level of pain that these kids are dealing with. And it changed me in a lot of ways, and it continues to change me. And as I mentioned in the book, had I not become a foster parent, I definitely would not be where I'm at in my writing career. My writing is a lot. It's primarily fueled by my experience, even though I write a lot about psychological research and from a lot of different angles. The reason I can write the way I do is because of my environment, because of my kids.
Woohoo! So if we talk about some of the structure that you put in place and some of the rules that we put in place or you put in place for them, a couple that comes to mind is sleep and sugar.
Yeah. So one of the things we found out immediately when we got these kids is that they slept longer than we expected. The first night we had them, we put them down to bed at like 8 o'clock. We both woke up at 6 the next morning. They still weren't awake. We kept checking in on them. We're like, are they alive? And we looked on Google and it said, kids ages, 3, 5, and 7 need about 12 hours of sleep. We had no clue. And so one of the first things we did was set up an evening routine where, we would have dinner together as a family at 5 o'clock. And we for the first 2 years, we put all the kids to bed at 6 o'clock in the morning. And 6 o'clock at night. And they would sleep from 6 to 6. And ever since we've had these kids, our kids have all slept for between 11 and 12 hours a night, and they still do. We have, our kids are now 6, 8, and 10. When we got them, they were 3, 5, and 7. But the 10-year-old goes to bed at 7 o'clock, and he wakes up between 6 and 6:30. The 6-year-old goes to bed at 6, and the 8-year-old goes to bed at 6:30. So, we've set up a really powerful evening routine so that they just know exactly what to do. It's stable, and these kids need stability. And so we have dinner. And then we spend an hour to 2 hours, depending on the kid, doing piano, journal writing, reading, math, and then, brushing your teeth, maybe a small story, a hug, and then they go to bed. And they're in the zone. They've been doing it for so long now. And then, during 2017, as a family, we just removed all the sugar from our house. We went sugar-free for a year. And it's shocking if you look at pictures of our little girl. She was always very chubby. And now she's just totally slender, vibrant. Like, these kids have experienced a physical transformation as much as they have an emotional transformation.
Awesome. So let's talk about a few of the tools that you just mentioned for them, because I think they're applicable. It kind of jumps out of order with your book, but it's so applicable for us, which is, first off, an evening routine, because we're all walking around sleep deprived.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously most people need, I mean, at least I would say 7 hours. But I mean, what Ariana Huffington said and Dave Asprey and others say is in order for sleep to happen, you have to set up the environment for it to happen. There can't be a mismatch between what you're trying to do in the environment and what you do. So if there's a TV in your bedroom, for example, that's just setting yourself up for failure. It also confuses the system. It's why is that in the environment? Why is that trigger even there? And so, yeah, I mean, if you want to have an amazing morning routine, and Dan Pink recently came out with the book When, he talks all about how you start something is generally how it's going to finish. So how you start your day is extremely important. If you really want to dissect how your mornings are going, you got to look at the night before. And everyone, the most easy place to look when we're talking about willpower is the night. Most people at night, their worst behavior comes out because of their decision fatigue. They're worn out, they're fried, and their environment's set up for failure. They're on their smartphones. They've got their junk food. They're just flowing with a huge overload of dopamine. And if you just set up the environment right, and if you just have a nice, healthy evening routine, you can have a lot more powerful of a morning routine and live a lot more proactively throughout the day, so that you're not being reactive to your environment, but so that you've proactively created an environment so that you can live good and you can actually get momentum.
Awesome. And then the next thing, which is something we were talking about real briefly off air, because we've just released our program on morning writing. It's called Automatic Writing Experience. It's basically going quiet and letting the pen flow and learning about yourself, which you asked, where did our success come from? And a huge amount of our success I have to attribute to our morning journaling, because stepping outside of yourself and getting big picture guidance and bouncing questions and doing inquiry means everything. So tell us about journaling. And I'm so excited that you're teaching them about journaling.
Yeah, no, journaling's awesome. My little guy, and this is just a quick aside, and then I'll dive into really journal. I want to write a book all about journaling, and I've probably written 10 articles about journaling. But a couple nights ago, I was with my 10-year-old son Caleb, and we're having him write in his journal every single night. And he still has a lot of confidence issues, because when we got these kids, they were all like 2 years behind in school, and so he's a year older than everyone in his class, and he has a lot of learned helplessness. When he hits a wall, he just quits, or he complains. And so a couple nights ago, maybe a week ago, we were trying to have him just write in his journal every night. That's one of the new things we're having him try to do. And we kind of have to give him the topics, And so we had him just let Caleb just write a full page in cursive about your experience living in a group home. You were there for 7 months. And he wrote like 2 or 3 sentences, and then he just stopped and he started complaining and crying and stuff and just saying, I can't remember anything. And I was just like, Caleb, like, you were there for 7 months. There's got to be something. What did you do for fun? Who was there? What kind of food did you eat? Just trying to get him. And he just kept saying, I can't remember. He was hitting this wall. And I just thought to myself, okay, I need to be extremely present with this kid. I need to just sit and help him get through this, because he's blocked. And, put down the cell phone. Let's go over to a desk. And let's just sit. And I pulled out my journal. And I started journaling with him. And I just was able to ask him questions and help him through it. And, it took a lot of patience and a lot of presence. But eventually he started writing. And then he just started writing. And I was writing there next to him about whatever. I actually took a picture of it. But he ended up finishing the page and just had this huge breakthrough. And he was so proud of himself for having written a full page. And ever since then, he does it every night. He writes a full page, and he could not have had that breakthrough had I not been there with him. Again, it's not willpower, it's connection. And so, one of the things I love about being a parent and just this whole experience is it's like I'm living in a self-improvement laboratory where I have to learn to get out of myself and be present with these kids all the time. And they have so much trauma that they're dealing with. And you can't punish the pain out of people, and you're as sick as your secrets. All of these ideas that you need to have an environment of compassion and love. But when it comes to my own journal writing, it was through journal writing that I became a writer. One of the things you asked me was, how did I get to this point so quick? It's because I've filled stacks of journals. journaling is how I've learned how to think the way I think. It's how I've been able to internalize lessons and figure out problems and learn how to think and learn how to write and communicate. But I journal in the first thing in the morning as well, for all the reasons you probably do. That's when you can break into the subconscious, breakthroughs, because your brain is doing so many amazing things, wiring things together while you're asleep, and you can totally pull those out if you're not reactive to a broken environment. If you create an environment where you can go and actually output, you can get so much clarity, and I'm sure that's where a lot of your insights come from. But yeah, so in the book, I talk about journaling from two different perspectives. I talk about the need to get out of your routine environment regularly so that you can actually have kind of a bird's eye view of your life rather than just a worm's eye view. Because if you're just in your routine, you only see what's in front of you. And if you can get out of that routine and get some clarity, then you can actually make some powerful decisions. And it's outside your routine environment that you can actually think about, write about, and make some big decisions. But then when you come back into your routine, you've got to actually follow through so that you can change your environment and change your life. And so that's kind of where I talk about how every morning you have to have a sacred space where you just write in an environment ridded, that's free of distraction, where you can just be in flow or meditate, or where you can actually visualize and get clarity and get confidence. And so that, for me, that's the purpose of a morning routine, is to put yourself into that peak state where you can be proactive.
Couldn't agree more. And are you still using the rolling, how should we call it, rolling sacred space for your morning journaling? Yeah,
I still do it in my car every single day. I mean, for me, it's get in my car between 5 and 6. Usually, I wake up about 5 to 5:30 and drive over to parking lot, and just that's where I'm free. That's where I'm free from all the triggers, the distractions of my house, and I write, and I get so many insights. And to me, that's like my favorite part of the day, because I'm outside the gym and I give myself usually an hour in my car to, either listen to audiobooks, meditate, pray, write in my journal, get myself in the space where I then can go and work out and come back. And if I want to write, I can write in kind of the same stream of consciousness way you're talking about, because I've already kind of framed the ideas. I've framed my goals. I've put myself in a place of commitment. And so I do it every day, and my car is like my sacred space where I go do that.
I love it, and there's so many different things that we could pull out of that, but one is micro habits, which is you do whatever you do, you roll out of bed, do whatever you need to do, crawl into your car, drive over to your parking lot, you start writing, you probably meditate, start writing, go through your writing, crawl out of your car, probably actually on fire, into the gym, get your workout done, come back, and you've had this whole string of activities going on that you didn't have to rely on willpower at all.
Exactly. Now, BJ Fogg, he's one of the best psychologists in the world. He's at Stanford. He talks a lot about design over willpower. Like when you design your environment, when you design your habits, I mean, he's actually coming against willpower so much, and he didn't even know about my book until recently. And he was like, man, I wish I wrote that book. But these micro habits, there is no willpower, because the decision's already been made, the habits have been formed, the identity's been shaped, and because the environment's been set up,
The only thing that you get to do, well, there's a lot of conscious action, but it's not as, we're trying to use, I think you call it automaticity, if I'm pronouncing that even.
Automaticity.
Automaticity. We're trying to use that to the max, but the one thing that you do have to do consciously, it's the power of commitment. You have to make a choice. And actually, you would probably say have to make a choice and even back yourself against the wall. Go get the 3, 5, and 7-year-old so that you're going to follow through.
Yeah, I think it's good to put yourself against the wall, or burn your boats, or however they say it. I think it's good to put yourself in a position of necessity so that then you've got to adapt and figure it out and learn on the fly. That's probably why you become successful so quickly in whatever you do, is because you learn through experience. You put yourself in situations where you have to succeed. You don't just do the theoretical education. You actually go get the real world education, and there's probably some big consequences for failure. And so you adapt, you learn, and you figure it out, and then you succeed quick.
I took myself, many years ago, and raced bicycles in Europe for a few years, trying to make it professional cyclist, trying to make it to the tour. And my opinion was, if I want to get really good, I have to put myself with the best, even if I'm really, really, really struggling in the beginning.
Totally. No, Yeah, I mean, I've cycled before. I even actually wrote an ebook called Slipstream Time Hacking, and it's all about the
Cool.
slipstream, and you know what I mean? All about, riding in the draft, you know what I mean? And that's what I've done so many times. I mean, that's a big part of environment, is drafting behind people who are ahead of you. Uh, that's kind of what happened with, Dr. Nate Lambert, for example, who totally changed my life. Is I went from having multiple professors and I was exerting willpower. I was trying to, make it happen. And then I found a mentor who just zoomed me decades ahead.
Now, that was fascinating because if I understand, you're working your tail off there. You're not even close to getting anything published, probably just the very word of published. You would have laughed. And then all of a sudden you're working with Dr. Nate Lambert, and almost literally a week later, there's your first published piece.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't published, but it was submitted for publication, and it became published, after some revisions. But yeah, one of the things I talk about is just that your success is relative. It's relative to what you're next to. And that's the whole power of context, is that who you are in one situation is different from who you are in a different situation. It's very different from how most Western thinkers think, because we're so individualistic. We're not focused on connection and context. But when I was with Nate Lambert, he was just one of my professors. It was like I stepped into this situation where he gave me all the opportunity in the world. So I was trying to get into graduate school. I had failed once before already getting in, because it's hard to get into these top tier universities, into these PhD programs. And all of a sudden I had this professor who was giving me these papers to work on, and then we were submitting them for publication. And I was just like, holy cow. So when I applied for graduate school again, I had all these papers submitted for publication. I actually had over 15 papers submitted for publication when I applied to graduate school. And it's like, my advisor though, Nate, he had 23 papers. This is what's ironic, actually, is he had 23 papers published when he finished his PhD. He had over 60 published 2 years later. But he actually got his PhD at Florida State under Frank Fitcham and Roy Baumeister. And Roy Baumeister is the person who wrote the book Willpower, and it's all of Baumeister's research on willpower. So I actually applied to work with Baumeister. Yeah, and
Coming full circle.
It's really funny. And, most of his research now is kind of being questioned because none of it can be replicated. But yeah, it's very interesting.
So going on the people side of things, how important are the people we surround ourselves with and the people they surround themselves with?
Yeah, no, it's huge. So what the research shows is that it's not your value system that determines your behavior. Most people, they value health. Most people value making good choices. Most people value, being honest, for example, or whatever. But their behaviors are more influenced by the norms of those around them, social norms. Every group has norms, and you quickly adapt to those norms. And so, yeah, I mean, the famous quote, "You're the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with," is very sound on a psychological level. There's a concept in psychology called the Pygmalion effect, and basically what it means is we rise up to or fall to the expectations of those around us. We just quickly mimic our environment. So, yeah, I would say that that's probably biggest component. And we already talked about marriage, but who you surround yourself with changes everything. One of the big ideas I talk about in the book is investing in relationships, like mastermind groups. Mm-hmm. When I started investing in mentorships, and this was like in late 2016. So I'll just give you a progression, and this is not to brag, but it's just to prove the point. As a graduate student, you make I was making about $12,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Basically what you get is you get your tuition paid for, and then you get a stipend of usually about $1,000 a month or something like that. So we're living on pennies. And it was it freaked my wife out when we found out that to buy the domain name benjaminhardy.com, it would cost $800. We were like, holy cow. But I decided to do that. I bought the domain name and I bought an online course for $197. And that course taught me how to write viral headlines. It taught me how to pitch my articles onto big platforms. And I used that to get really good at growing my audience. And anyways, I started to invest big. So in 2016, in about September, I hired Ryan Holiday. I had a big enough audience at that point where I did some coaching and I was starting to make some money. So in 2015, I made like 12,000 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, I made around 100,000 because I launched a product and I started to do some coaching. But I hired Ryan Holiday, and I just hired him for $3,000 to help me write the book proposal for what became Willpower Doesn't Work. It was actually going to be called The Proximity Effect, about how what surrounds you shapes you, but Willpower Doesn't Work was really the core idea. But I hired him for $3,000, and even though that was a lot of money, had I not hired him to do that, I probably still to this point would not have written that proposal. Because there's a lot of emotional resistance to learning new things. But when you hire someone who's where you want to be, where you can get the access and the information directly and where they can just show you exactly how to do it, he introduced me to an agent, and very quickly I was able to get a book deal. And the idea that I've discovered is that when you can invest in the right relationships, you can usually get a 10x return on the investment. So if I hired Ryan for $3,000, the idea is that the investment would return back to me 30 or more, or in this case, it ended up being over almost $300,000 that I got paid to write the book. But when you start investing in relationships and putting yourself in certain proximity to people, and what we're talking about is why are the people around you so important? It's huge because how you behave is not, we wish it was based on our value system, but it's not. It's based on the people around us. And so you really want to surround yourself with people where you can have that automaticity factor, where you can just automatically be the person you want to be and become better. Like you surround yourself with cyclists who are better than you. And I've just found in the last year and a half, by surrounding myself with certain people, my ability to make money or my ability to think, write, publish, or be a better parent is just, it makes it so fun because you realize how fluid and flexible and malleable you are. Human beings are so transformative. We can transform so fast. And the problem with the kind of individualistic approach is that it puts people in a fixed mindset where they think that who they are is who they're going to be. And they don't realize that their environment can totally transform them.
So let's go from there. First off, Aunt Jane and the Genius Network. Then we got to talk about Nate and a Tesla.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I'll remind you that. So Aunt Jane first.
Yeah. So my Aunt Jane joined Genius Network, which is a group I'm a part of now, and Joe Polish has become an amazing friend of mine. But she joined it, I think, back in 2014, right when I was in my PhD program. And all of a sudden, I saw my aunt just change. She was surrounded by very successful thinkers and entrepreneurs, and her business went like this. It just blew up. But her mindset, her experience, she was just a different person because of the experiences she had. And one of the things I think a lot about is this PTSD. Like, we think a lot about how someone can go through a negative experience and how it can permanently change their personality, but very few people talk about transformational experiences that are basically like PTSD, but the reverse, where you have these transformational experiences that radically change your personality permanently, but for the positive. And that's what I saw for her, was just that she had these experiences that fundamentally changed her in a more, like, it's not like she was a different person. She was just a better version of herself. And so I wanted to be a part of that. And so, I had the goal of doing that. I actually had a strap on my backpack, and I would always look at it and just think, I'm going to be in Genius Network before I finished my PhD. That was my goal.
And that's a $25,000 goal because it's not inexpensive to join.
Oh, it's very expensive. It's called the 25K group for a reason, because it costs $25,000 a year to be a part of that group. And what that basically gets you is it gets you 3 meetings. So you go to, Arizona, and you do two-day meetings, and then you get the 3-day event, where like Tony Robbins speaks and stuff like that. I actually ended up speaking at the annual event of Genius Network. And, truth be told, I actually used my journal to do that. I manifested it because when you have a white hot why, when the why is strong enough, you'll figure out how. And so when I invested in Genius Network, and, obviously it took time. It took time to get to the point where you could actually make a $25,000 investment, and it takes a huge leap of faith. I was actually just talking to JJ Virgin, and she talks about how important investing a little bit more money than you feel comfortable in doing is, because it stretches you. And I actually I just recently read the book The Alchemist again.
Oh, yeah.
And I was blown away because, in The Alchemist, the little shepherd boy, he meets the king, Melchizedek. And Melchizedek tells him, you've got to give me 1/10 of your sheep. And the boy says, why? He says, I forget exactly why he says it, but he basically says, that's payment for you to figure out your life legend or whatever. And so the boy made the payment, and the king said, now you need to go to the pyramids, and that's where your treasure is. But you already knew that. He said, but I had you pay your 6 sheep so that you would actually make the decision. And I think the idea is powerful, and that's one thing I found big, is that when you start investing money in your goals or in your dreams, or when you even start just generously giving your money to causes you believe in, whether that's like to your church or just to something, that act becomes the decision. So what we're talking a lot about is the importance of making powerful decisions that then go on to transform your life. And I have come to believe that when you start investing, as JJ said, just a little bit more than you feel comfortable with, that's when you really make this transformation. That's when you get committed. And so, yeah, I decided to join Genius Network because a lot of my heroes, a lot of the authors and the thinkers that have influenced my thinking are part of that group. And so I wanted to be a part of it, but I wanted to contribute. And so I joined the Genius Network, and I just totally embedded myself in that culture. And now it's a huge part of my life and how I think, and it's changed everything for me.
Woohoo! And I love how you manifested it from your journal, from carrying the tag right on your bag. So I'm guessing that you did a lot of repetition of each day, reminding yourself of really what your why is, where you're focused, where you're trying to go.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I did is I manifested this idea that I would actually speak on the stage, that I would actually speak at the Genius Network annual event, which was a seeming impossibility. I joined Genius Network in, I think, maybe August of 2017, and that's when I was writing the book. And then the annual event was in November. My first small group meeting was in September, and I signed up to give a 10-minute talk, and I taught all about how I've quickly grown my online audience. But before I even gave that talk, I wrote in my journal, and I actually wrote it in the draft of the book, that I'm going to speak at the annual event, because when you speak at the event, you can give away galley copies to everyone there, and you actually have a galley copy of the book. So yeah, you're holding that right there. And this is the actual hardcover of the book right here. But I wanted to give a galley copy, the one you've got, to all 400 people at the event. And I knew that the only way I could do that is if I spoke at it. So that's kind of the why. That's the clarity. That's the experience I wanted to have. That's the situation I wanted to create. And so I wrote about it all in my journal over and over. And I figured out, it took some time, when the why is strong enough, you figure out how. And it took some serious hoops and stuff like that for that to happen. But Joe, for example, there was over 100 people who had asked Joe, who are in Genius Network, if they could speak, and he had to say no to over 100 people, because Tony Robbins spoke on that stage, Peter Diamandis, so many people. But I gave my talks, and I just made the right connection with Joe, and eventually he asked me if I would speak, literally 2 weeks before, because someone fell off, someone who was supposed to speak, like Damon John or someone, couldn't come. And so, the cool part is in order to experience the level of commitment that I believe is required to transform yourself to achieve your dreams, you have to invest, and you have to put yourself in the right environments. It's not enough just to have a positive mindset about it for a short period of time, because in the wrong environments, that environment's too hard to maintain. It never becomes automatic. It never develops automaticity, because the environment's always going against it. And it takes a lot of work just to maintain a positive attitude, unless you can put yourself in the environment where then that attitude translates into the person you become.
You also have to make yourself uncomfortable. You raised the bar to a very uncomfortable level. Here are the people that you've looked up to, in a sense, and your goal is to now speak with them like that.
Yeah, I think that's the fun part, is when you can have that level of faith. So what I'm talking about is we're talking about using the external environment as the means of transforming yourself. But I still believe that your internal security, your security as a person has to be internal. Your faith has to be internal. So it takes a lot of faith and trust that if you put yourself in these situations, that you can quickly adapt, and that you can figure it out. And sometimes you fail. You've got to be willing to put yourself in those situations where it might not work out. But yeah, I have come to realize just through my own kind of guinea pig experience that if you put yourself in these type of situations, and if you know why you're there, and if you've made committed decisions, and if you become invested, you can you can transform very quick, and you can translate what's happening in the environment to yourself, and you can quickly become friends with the people who are your role models, or you can, and you do it, you learn and you fail, but yeah, you can get there very fast if you're willing to kind of shape the situation around you.
Woohoo! So I want to talk about shaping the situation. First off, you said faith has to be internal. What does that mean? How do we build that?
Yeah. So I love this question because to me this brings up even more fun stuff. So there's a meta-analysis all about confidence, and about how confidence is not what leads to success, but success creates confidence. So if you start getting these little wins, you were talking about my morning routine, rolling out of bed, getting in my car, driving to the parking lot, writing in my journal, listening to good content, going and working out. Those are a bunch of small wins that create momentum. When you start to, so for me, confidence is nothing more than self-trust. Mm-hmm. Faith is, you could go a million different directions about what faith is. In the context of what I'm talking about, it's more the assurance or the trust, the hope that what you want is going to happen. It's what Tony Robbins would call a resolve. Because you're committed and because you kind of know that what you want will manifest. So there's a book called the Master Key System, and it's all about, it was like one of the first self-help books of all time, kind of like a lot of the key ideas on like the law of attraction, really. But one of the things he says that's really good is he says, you are your patient, and your only job is to convince yourself of the truth of which you want to see manifest. It has to become true to you before it happens. As I talk about in the book, you can do that by first having that confidence, but then you've got to set up the environment that makes it real. And sometimes it's in setting the environment that you develop the confidence. But I think that the faith comes, for me, I will openly admit I'm a person of faith. I have a relationship with God. I pray and I seek these things. And so my faith, is in my relationship with God, and it's also in the relationship I've developed with myself and just with the world, and learning how to make things happen, to be a conscious creator, as you could say. So that's part of the faith is just, so the one part about confidence, about how confidence comes through behavior, but also personality. A lot of people think that your personality is who you are. And a lot of people who I really agree with say that personality is not who you are. Personality is kind of just the outward manifestation of how you're acting, and it's very fluid as well. It's malleable. So basically, in psychology terms, it's not your behavior. It's not your personality that determines your behavior. It's actually your behavior that determines your personality. And so, if you want to change who you are, you just need to change your behavior. And that's really powerful. So if you surround yourself with new people, and if you start acting in different ways, you'll become a new person. You really will. And so I think, I have this faith, this trust that things will work out, and it's not tied to an outcome. It's just tied to the expectation that the best things will happen. And then I have this scientific knowledge that my behavior and that my environment and that myself is very fluid. And so it's a potent cocktail for being able to just put yourself in situations, adapt to those situations, transform your identity, and not being tied to what you think your personality is. Because if you actually have spiritual beliefs, you can't believe that your personality or how you're acting in the world is you. You're so much more, you're enormously huge. You can't be defined. And how you're being manifest out in the world is such a small, insignificant part of you. You should never limit how you define yourself by how you see yourself right now. And so I just think human beings are enormously powerful. And when we have that faith that things can happen, and then we really genuinely put the rubber to the road by putting ourselves in situations where that faith is then tested and and exercised, then it becomes real.
Woohoo! Just that little bit alone is worth the whole price of admission for listening to this show today. That was huge. I have my wife right now. She's out for another day and a half. She's out in the Roaring Forks Valley in Colorado. I've got this majestic image behind me of mountains, and I have this belief that we are our land. We are who we surround ourselves with. We are our internal environment, our external environment, our temporal environment. Everything around, inside and outside of us, shapes who we are and how we act. And so she's out there exploring to see what feels right to help us stretch and get uncomfortable and get epic in our next growth phase of life.
So excited for you, man. I'm excited for you to, what's cool is when you become a conscious creator, when you realize your environment shapes you, then your biggest responsibility is to say, what environment do I need to shape because what environment do I need to put myself in or create, because that environment is going to create me. As you said, we are our land. And so I think that that's kind of when a person can truly start to dictate their future. And Ellen Langer, we spoke a little bit about mindfulness on the off, but Ellen Langer, who's the queen of mindfulness, I think that her work is some of the best. Her work Counterclockwise and her book Mindfulness. These two books are some of the most amazing books in the world. But one of the quotes that I heard from her in Counterclockwise that was one of the main reasons I wrote this book. She said that social psychologists argue that who a person is at any one time is basically the product of their context. But who creates the context? The more mindful you become, the more you realize that you can create the context in which you are in. And when you realize that you can create the context, then you can believe in the possibility of change. So, who you are is the product of your situation or your environment. And the more mindful you are, the more you realize that your environment and you are two parts of the same whole. That is what mindfulness is it's awareness of context and how you are part of that context. And then once you realize that you actually can create the context, you get to create the situation, you get to shape these things as you and your wife are doing, then you realize that you can change.
Woohoo! It comes back to, and it brings us full circle back to your kids, which is the power of presence. How present am I being with my life? How present am I being with my decisions? How present am I being with those around me?
Yeah. I think that most people are not present. They have automaticity in the opposite direction. They're living unconsciously, but in the wrong way. They're being reactively triggered by environments that conflict with who they want to be. So they're not consciously creating environments. They're unconsciously being shaped by the wrong ones. And in the beginning of the book, I talk about Charles Darwin, about how his two theories of evolution are that it either happens organically, where you just adapt and react to environments, or it happens proactively, where you shape the situations to create whatever features or personalities or traits that you want. And so, either your environment is unhealthily shaping you, or you're proactively shaping the right environment. And most people are reactive. Most people are, the first thing they do when they wake up is they just get sucked right back into their smartphone, or, and they're still on it when they get home with their kids and they're not being present. And, I realized a few days ago when I had that experience, the cost of my behavior, the absolute consequences of me not being present with my kid. He would not have had that breakthrough with his journal. He would still have had that learned helplessness. He would never have written that one page. And then subsequently, he would not have written the 10 pages he has since. He would still be stuck. That would have still been his identity had I not sat down and been present with him and helped him have that breakthrough. And the sad part is that a lot of parents, they put their kids in a position of willpower where they say, just do it, and they don't ever make the connection. They never sit presently. They're sitting on their phones and they're telling their kids to do something. It's like smoking a cigarette and telling your kids not to smoke, and rather than trying to put our kids in a position where they've got to grit their way through it and where they've got to do it alone, we need to be present with them, because the consequences are huge for us and the consequences are huge for them.
Woohoo! Anything else? Jessica always wants me to ask a question for parents and their kids. Any other advice you would give for parents for their kids today?
Oh, man. I think just you got to have good moments with them, like as regularly as possible. Our 8-year-old girl, who was the one I told at the beginning, who was 5, throwing the tantrums, she sometimes shuts down. And it's so amazing when you can just reverse that and you can turn her around, and you just do that by having moments with them, like, just physical touch, things like that, sitting with them, actually caring about what they care about, just giving them your time and your attention, and just being with them. And so I just think, one of the things that I've done, and I didn't write about in the book, that's been really helpful for my relationship with my kids, is just doing what we call daddy dates. Once a month, I just spend time.
Cool.
Once a month, I spend one-on-one time with each kid, and it's literally just, an hour. They get to choose what we do. We sit together and talk for the first 5-10 minutes and just talk about what they're doing, how they're doing, just so that they can feel comfortable if they need to share any problems. And then we just go play. And we just spend an hour, one-on-one. And those moments are amazing. So I just think, you've got to spend time. You got to spend time with your kids. You've got to prioritize them. You've got to put the cell phones down. You got to create the environment where it can happen, and where they can thrive. You got to create an environment where they can just bloom.
Woohoo! So I mentioned something before. I want to double back real quickly, and I'm not suggesting everybody go out and buy a car or spend a whole bunch of money on something necessarily, but I want to talk about Nate and the Tesla, because to me, it's almost like putting on a new jacket or a new piece of clothing or a new hat, and how much it can change you.
Yeah. So I'll share two really cool ideas that kind of blend in with everything I've already been talking about, because they're some of my favorite science and psychology. So there's an idea called self-signaling, and it's basically the idea that your behavior shapes your identity. So how we rate ourselves, how we view ourselves, is based on how we act. If you start waking up in the morning, you're going to start to see yourself as a morning person. If you start smoking cigarettes, you're going to see yourself as a smoker. Basically, it's just you evaluate yourself based on your behavior. So when you start changing your behavior, you change your personality. The second one is precognition, and it's this idea that you can predict how you will feel and how you will, in mindsets and things like that, when you act in certain ways and when you put yourself in certain situations. So, when you're around certain people, you can predict how you're going to feel. There's certain people that you just know when you're going to get around them, it's just going to be kind of a downer. That's precognition. You can predict that in certain environments, you're going to have a certain internal experience. So what my friend Nate did, and by the way, this is the same guy as Dr. Nate Lambert. He's free.
I hadn't caught that one.
Well, that's because I didn't call him Dr. Nate Lambert. He ended up going into a different field. Now he's in real estate. Because the experience with him as a professor was like 4 years ago, and now he's decided to go into real estate because there's a lot more room for growth in that environment. But anyways, he drove, and this story, you can apply it in a million different ways, but in his context, in his situation, this made a lot of sense. So because he's a real estate agent, he's driving people around to buy houses, and he also sells real estate information products to people about how to get rich, basically selling real estate. The problem with Nate was he was making a ton of money, but he's a super frugal guy. And so he was driving like a kind of a beater car. It was like a Toyota Camry or something. It was not a nice car, even though he could afford a better car. And most people think, well, it shouldn't matter what car he drives. Mm-hmm. And for Nate as a person, of course it didn't matter. He was a good person either way. But for how it presented itself to his clients or to the people who are going to buy his houses, it just felt like a mismatch. I mean, here's this guy talking this big game with all this confidence, and he drives this crappy car, and he's driving his clients around in this little beater car. And so what he did was he decided that he was going to try to make a small tweak in his environment. So he actually, it was a big tweak. He ended up buying a Tesla. But what was shocking is how much his life and his career changed by simply buying a Tesla. And it fit really well with his career. So you might not need to do that with your career, but what is the Tesla for you? In this case, what happened to Nate was he bought a Tesla. He started posting about it on social media. Immediately, his sales went through the roof. He became the number one salesman in the state for a few reasons. One is because his clients loved being in his Tesla. They viewed him differently because he jumped in a Tesla and was driving around, and they were like, holy cow, this guy's a baller, and I think that he was a lot more persuasive. Mm-hmm. He had more credibility and authority, which are, persuasion triggers. But also he got a lot more clients because all of a sudden people were seeing him drive this Tesla and talking about his Tesla. And so that was to them credibility that he must be being successful. He was successful anyways, but they just didn't see it. And then when he bought the Tesla, they're like, oh my gosh, Nate must really be doing well. And so he got a lot more people to buy his products. He ended up paying the Tesla off within two months of buying it because he got quadruple the business within a month. And then just on the inside, his confidence changed. And it changed for a few reasons. It changed because, he had invested in a powerful environment and he was becoming more successful. And again, confidence is the product of winning. Winning doesn't come from confidence. So when you start winning, you have more confidence. And then that confidence then can ripple into more winning. But he watched himself do something big. He achieved a goal. He was being successful and more success was coming. And so then his internal reality changed. He became more confident, which then led to more success. So, it was just a huge ripple effect of how by making a small change in his environment, it transformed his life.
Huge. Woohoo! So if I took off my coaching hat, Ben, and I gave it to you today, because I don't want people to leave this saying, oh, that was a great show, changed the environment. Yeah. I want them to actually take action today. What one homework assignment would you give people so that they can begin to change their environment, to change their lives today?
Yeah, I'll give them 2 quick homework assignments.
Go for it.
And it's actually going to be 3 simple ones. Number 1 is you have to be mindful, which is just the realization that your environment is shaping everything about you. That's step 1, is just the realization. Step 2, you've got to remove everything that conflicts. And so, if you have the decision and the goal to do something, you've got to remove the thing and the people, or you got to restructure those environments or those relationships. You've got to do it. That's, I think, the hardest part. I've had a lot of people read this book, and they say that it's hard, and it would be a really easy message if I just told you that if you just believed it, it would happen. But the truth is you actually have to create it in the real world, which means you've got to shatter the environment of yourself and other people. But you've got to remove everything that conflicts from your goals. And so that could be people, that could be TV, that could be the news, that could be whatever it is, whatever. One of my favorite stories actually is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the story of the British rowing team from the year 2000.
Maybe. Keep going. We'll see.
Yeah. So basically, this will really cement the idea. So the British rowing team sucked for decades. And then they came across this idea. They made this commitment to themselves that, before the 2000 Olympics, they started asking themselves just one question. And I call this an implementation intention in the book. But they asked themselves, with every choice they made, they had to ask themselves the question, will it make the boat go faster? So it's like, all right, when you're going to eat a donut, they ask themselves, will it make the boat go faster? If the answer is no, then they don't do it. Am I going to go out and stay up late and party? Will it make the boat go faster? No. And so they ask themselves that question all the time, and they used their decision as the framework for every choice they made, every situation they put themselves in, and they just said their goal is going to determine their choices and their environments. And so once they got to the Olympics, they just crushed everyone because all of their decisions up to that point were, will it make the boat go faster? And so when it comes to your environment, whatever your goal is, my question is it making the boat go faster? If it's no, like if you're trying to be healthy, look at the food in your kitchen. Is it making the boat go faster? Is it allowing you to do what you want to do, or is it conflicting with your goal? And are you having to use willpower? If you have to use willpower, there's a problem. There's an internal or an external problem, and you want to remove those. You want to make determined decisions. And then you want to develop automaticity, which is to be congruent with your environment. So, step 2, remove everything that conflicts. Only do things that quote unquote make the boat go faster. Number 3 would be just going back to this whole idea of start investing money in what you want to do. It doesn't have to be big amounts in the beginning. Like I said in the beginning of my story, I invested $197 in an online course that gave me the information to write viral headlines. I didn't will my way to writing viral headlines. I just got an education from someone who could do it. So if you start investing money in those goals, then you will start to become heavily committed, and you'll start to put yourself in environments where you can transform yourself, like we've been talking about today. I think that those are kind of just 3 really simple things you can do. And then obviously, just as we've talked about in depth, follow your course and study that morning journaling like you teach. Go through his course and actually study morning journaling.
Thank you. Woohoo! On that note, follow my course and get your book. Where can people go to find your beautiful book and find out more?
Absolutely. So you can find the book, obviously, at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Definitely get the book. In my opinion, it's going to kind of probably reverse engineer a lot of how you think about things. There is an incentive-based competition actually happening right now. If it doesn't resonate with you, don't do it. I want you to get the book anyways, but Joe Polish, speaking of Genius Network, he and I have become really good friends. And if you go to willpowerdoesn'twork.com, you're actually going to see a video of me and Joe Polish. Mm-hmm. And he actually donated his Tesla, speaking of Teslas, as an incentive for the person who wins. So basically what we've done is there is a competition happening right now. And basically here's how the competition works. You just go to willpowerdoesn'twork.com and you register. And all you do is just opt in. You can do that through Facebook. You've got to buy the book. And then you've got until June 6th to transform your life in one of 4 areas, either income, health, a side project, or an addiction. And then by June 6th is all you have to do is just submit like a short essay describing how you've transformed your life. And the person who changes their life the most by June 6th gets Joe's Tesla.
Woohoo! That is huge.
Yeah. And like there's going to be 14 other finalists who will win a cruise for themselves or a loved one. So really, what we want people to do is we want people to apply this book. You don't have to do this. The book, if you read it and if you apply it, it will change your life. But if you want to just have a little bit more incentive, a little bit of gamification, go to willpowerdoesn'twork.com, get the book, and just join this competition and change your life over the next, 50, 60, 70 days whenever you read this, and you've got a shot to win a Tesla.
I love it. I'm not sure how far, well, I don't want to limit myself by saying that. Flow. I was journaling earlier this week and I'm writing, and I was ordering myself a new pair of speed skates. I'm getting back into speed skating, one of my true loves from many years ago. And I ended up one site to the next, and the next thing I know, I'd hired the Danish national team coach for speed skating because I want to take my game. It just flowed. And again, this goes back to what you're saying. Reach high and surround yourself with the people that you want to become. And so I'm following the advice in this book, and I'm hiring at that level. And it'll be interesting to see how I'd have no idea if I even plan on racing again, but by putting myself around people that are insanely fit, I plan on getting insanely fit myself.
Well, and by investing, you're investing in a really quality mentorship. That to me shows your standards for yourself, and also just your desire for transformation and your joy in the hobby is you're willing to invest not just in anyone, but into this amazing coach, and that just shows, the level of self-respect you have and just the level of joy you have in the sport and how much you want to change yourself. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So you're willing to put yourself in that environment. It's amazing.
And there's a lot of pressure, internal pressure. I'm creating an environment of pressure, which is not only if you pay money, and if you pay a good amount of money, you're actually more likely to see results because you're going to put that pressure. There's a feedback mechanism there. But if you're working with somebody really good, then you don't want to play a low-level game. You won't feel comfortable about that. You're going to really try to do what it takes.
Totally. Yeah, you rise or fall to the expectations of those around you. That's why I hired Ryan Holiday to write my first book proposal.
Awesome. 2 last quick questions. First off, what brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
I love that woohoo factor. Actually, Joe Polish always says that you need to have more woo and less ah in your life. So I think you two would be friends. But, what brings me the most joy is just, being with my family, you just living life, being with my family, living my faith, and just enjoying life. I mean, yeah, I get a lot of joy out of so much because when you're growing, you're happy. You know what I mean? And when you're doing what you want, when you're living in alignment, it's great, even if it's hard. So yeah.
Woohoo! And any last words of wisdom? Ben, this has been phenomenal. We talked beforehand. I said how excited. I felt like a kid in the candy store. I've got your book all beat up here from reading it so much and going back and forth and back and forth. It is so, so beautiful. So I can't thank you enough. I'm coddling your book now. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today?
I'll just give the quote, and this isn't as profound after all we've talked about, but it's the quote from Marshall Goldsmith at the beginning. If you do not create and control your environment, it will create and control you. And, if you really want to change, you've got to do it. You've just got to. And when you do it, you won't turn back. It'll be a point of no return and you'll love it.
Woohoo!
So yeah, love being on the show with you, man. This has been a lot of fun. You're a great person, man. You got a lot of good energy and it's just fun to be with you.
It goes both ways. We've got to keep in touch. We're on the same path.
Seriously, we do.
I'm
sure there's some good synergy here, my friend. I'm sure that there's some seriously good synergy.
Oh, I would love to work with you on anything. I think it would be an honor and a pleasure, and we would rock it.
We would. 100% agree.
Awesome. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get Willpower Doesn't Work, and begin changing your environment today, and shine bright. Woohoo! This was awesome, my friend. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Cool. I loved it. Seriously, it was a lot of fun. It's amazing when, two people on these high-level trajectories synergize, it becomes 100x. You're great at what you do. It's beautiful. It's fun.
Thank you. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!